All right, so today we're going to dive into something uh, really interesting, I think, and that is the world of beverage distribution management. We're going way beyond just like your favorite drinks and really going to uncover the whole system, the intricate system that gets those drinks into your hands.
Yeah.
And to help us like really get into it, we've got RoleCatcher's career guide, their FAQs, and then also some insights that they shared with us from their platform.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people, when you say beverage distribution, they just don't really, it doesn't conjure up the complexity that's behind it.
Totally. And it's funny, right? Because you think of it and you're like, oh, stocking shelves, like how complicated can that be?
Right.
But RoleCatcher actually defines a beverage distribution manager as someone who, and this is a mouthful, organizes and oversees the dispatch of a variety of beverages to numerous retail outlets, restaurants, and stores,
Right.
which kind of hints at something much, much bigger.
It does. Yeah, it really does. It's a fascinating process, and it's so much more than it used to be. We're not just talking about trucks and warehouses anymore. I mean, those are obviously still part of it, but now you've got GPS tracking, automated inventory systems, and get this, data analytics is becoming huge in this field.
Data analytics for beverages.
Yeah.
That's not something, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but that's not the first thing I would have thought of. So tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how does that even work?
Well, just imagine, these managers are analyzing sales data, they're looking at market trends, even like customer preferences, and all of that goes into deciding, what drinks go where, when they go there. They're basically optimizing this entire system, for
Yeah.
efficiency, for profit. It's really impressive.
So it's a lot more strategic than it might seem at first glance.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, like, what about the work environment itself? Like, are we talking, just like a desk in a bustling warehouse surrounded by mountains of, soda? I mean, what does that actually look like?
Well, it's not always what you might expect. It can actually be surprisingly diverse. So yeah, you might be in a production facility, you might be at a transportation company, it could even be a retail location. It really depends. On the specific role, the company, there are a lot of factors.
Right, that makes sense. But no matter where you are, I would imagine that it's a pretty fast-paced field. Like,
Yeah.
there's got to be some intense moments, right?
Oh, absolutely. There can be a lot of pressure for sure. I mean, you've got unexpected delays, equipment issues, sudden changes in demand. You really have to be able to think on your feet and juggle like a million things at once. I remember one holiday season, a blizzard hit, and we had trucks stranded, inventory was piling up. It took some serious problem solving to make sure those orders actually got fulfilled on time.
Wow, yeah, that does not sound like a job for the faint of heart.
Okay.
But I'm also guessing that there's probably a lot of interaction with different types of people, which, I mean, for some people, that could be a real plus. Yeah.
You're right. That's actually one of the things I really enjoy about this field. You're constantly in communication with different production managers. You've got transportation companies, retail managers, sales teams. It's really diverse. And building those relationships, that's actually a key part of the job. It's how you ensure that everything runs smoothly.
It's all connected. So we've got the strategy, the tech, the people skills. But I'm curious, like, what about the future of this industry? Like, what are the big trends that are going to be shaping how those beverages actually get from point A to point B?
Well, RoleCatcher highlights three major trends that I think are really interesting. The first is the demand for faster, more efficient transportation. We're talking, think beyond trucks. Drones, autonomous vehicles, these are the kinds of innovations that are starting to come into play.
Okay, so drones delivering my sparkling water. That's a future I can definitely get behind. All right, what else is changing?
Well, data analytics, like we talked about, that's only going to get bigger. I mean, we're talking about predicting what people will want to drink, potentially even before they know it themselves.
Whoa, that's almost like predicting the future.
It kind of is. By analyzing all of that past data, looking for the trends, it actually allows these companies to get pretty good at anticipating what consumers will want. And then on top of that, you've got all these innovations happening in packaging and distribution technologies. So it's really changing the game on multiple levels.
That is fascinating. But okay, let's talk about like the realities of this career path for a minute. So give me the highs, give me the lows, paint me the whole picture. Like, what is it actually like to work in this field?
Sure. So RoleCatcher points out that the high earning potential is definitely a big plus. And then there's also a lot of opportunity for career growth, which is always good. Plus, I'm not going to lie, working with beverages can be exciting. There are definitely perks to that. And depending on your role, there might even be some potential for travel. So that's always a nice bonus.
You know, travel, exciting beverages.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal here, but what about the downsides? Like, what does RoleCatcher say about the things that maybe aren't so glamorous?
Well, the hours can be tough. That's definitely something to consider. You often end up working evenings, weekends, holidays, especially during those peak seasons, like I mentioned earlier with the blizzard. And the competition for these roles, it can be fierce. It's a desirable field to go into. And then, depending on the specific job, it can be physically demanding at times.
Right, so it definitely takes a certain kind of person who can handle all of that.
Mm.
But I noticed that RoleCatcher also mentions specializations within beverage distribution management. And I don't know, I just kind of assumed that that title, that was the specialization.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
So there's more to it than that.
There is. You'd be
Yeah.
surprised. The guide doesn't get into like super specific specializations, but it does emphasize that more and more specializing is becoming really crucial for career advancement.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting because they also gave us this list of related careers, and I'm looking at it right now, and some of these are really interesting. Fish distribution manager, clothing and footwear. Like, how do those even connect back to beverages?
Right. Well, what's fascinating is that the core skills of a beverage distribution manager, things like logistics, inventory management, data analysis, those are actually applicable across a ton of different industries.
So you really could take those skills and apply them to something totally different if you wanted to.
Exactly. Of course, each industry is going to have its own unique challenges, right? Like think
Mhm.
about a fish distribution manager. They're dealing with perishable goods. So temperature control, speed, those are absolutely paramount. They might even be coordinating with fisheries, which adds a whole other layer of complexity to the whole thing. But the underlying principles, they're still the same.
That's a really cool insight. I never would have thought of it that way. So, okay, say someone is listening to this right now and they're thinking, this is it. This is the career for me. Where do they even begin?
Well, luckily, RoleCatcher actually gives some really great advice on this. They list a few relevant degrees, like business administration is a popular one. Supply chain management, of course, makes a lot of sense. And then even hospitality management, which, you might not think of right away, but it actually makes a lot of
Okay,
sense.
so those are good starting points, but it's not just about the degree, right? Like experience plays a big role too, I'm assuming.
Absolutely, yeah. The guide really emphasizes hands-on experience. And they suggest starting in entry-level positions. And these are jobs that, honestly, a lot of listeners probably have experience with already. So things like sales representative, warehouse supervisor, customer service, those are all great places to start.
Oh, I love that. So even those seemingly unrelated jobs could actually give you really valuable skills for a career in distribution management.
Exactly, because you're learning about inventory, you're dealing with customers, you're understanding the importance of like timely deliveries. Those are all fundamental to distribution management, regardless of the industry.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. You've landed your dream job. You're officially a beverage distribution manager. Congratulations. But you don't want to stay there forever. You want to climb that corporate ladder. So what does advancement actually look like in this field?
Well, RoleCatcher outlines a few key strategies that I think are really helpful. You could move up within the distribution or logistics department, maybe into more of a senior management position, or you could use that experience to kind of transition into a related field like supply chain management or operations management.
So there's room to grow, either within that company or by kind of branching out a little bit.
Exactly. And no matter what, continuous learning, that is essential in this field. RoleCatcher really stresses that, staying updated on industry trends, new technologies, best practices, that's how you stay ahead. And that might mean taking online courses, going to workshops, even just like keeping up with industry publications. It all matters.
You never stop learning, right? But I'm also curious, like, how do you actually demonstrate that expertise? Like, you can be learning all this stuff, but if you're in a job interview, how do you actually stand out from the crowd?
Well, one thing that RoleCatcher suggests is building a portfolio, and this is where you can really showcase your wins. So, have you implemented any successful distribution strategies? Were you part of a cost-saving initiative? Any process improvements that you spearheaded? Highlighting those achievements, that is key when you're trying to, go for that promotion or get that new role.
So it's not enough to just have the knowledge. You have to be able to prove that you can actually put it to work.
Exactly. And then don't underestimate the power of networking. That's huge in any field, but especially this one. Industry events, professional organizations, those are great ways to connect with people, learn from others in the field, and you never know what opportunities might come up.
Yeah, it seems like so much of this career, it's about More than just like the technical side, it's about those relationships. It's about always being willing to adapt.
It really is. The beverage industry is constantly evolving. And to be successful, you need to be willing to evolve with it.
So true. We've covered a lot of ground here, like we talked about, kind of the ins and outs of the job itself, the trends, the potential career paths. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I did want to circle back to something that stood out to me in RoleCatcher's materials.
Mhm.
And it was this idea of like transferable skills and how a career in beverage distribution management, it's not just about beverages. It can actually open doors to a much wider range of opportunities.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I find most exciting about this field. Because the skills that you're developing, like we talked about, logistics, inventory management, data analysis, and then even just like problem solving, communication, leadership, those are valuable in so many different industries.
So yeah, it's not just about like moving beverages from point A to point B. It's about building this skill set that you could really take anywhere.
Precisely. So let's say, you've been a beverage distribution manager for a few years, you're ready for something new. Maybe you want to try a different industry.
What kind of options would be out there realistically?
Well, you could climb the ladder within the beverage industry, of course, maybe overseeing a larger distribution network or managing other managers. That's always a possibility.
Yeah, kind of moving up to that next level.
Or you could leverage that experience and transition into a related industry.
Okay.
So something like food and beverage manufacturing, retail is a big one. Logistics and transportation, obviously, those are all very closely related.
It's amazing to see how this one role can be like a stepping stone to so many different paths.
It really is. And especially now with the demand for supply chain and logistics expertise, like that's only growing. So having a background in beverage distribution, that gives you a real advantage in the job market.
That's so valuable. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about when they're first starting out. It's not just about the job itself. It's about that long-term trajectory and what doors it might open for you down the line.
Absolutely. And beyond just the career aspect, think about the personal and professional growth that you're getting by being in such a dynamic field.
Yeah.
I mean, you're facing challenges, you're celebrating successes, you're building resilience, you're learning how to adapt, you're really understanding how businesses work at a fundamental level.
Those are skills that you can take with you anywhere.
Hmm.
Okay, so we talked about the skills, the trends, but now I'm curious, like, let's get into the day-to-day for a minute. What are some of the actual tasks and challenges that a beverage distribution manager, like, what are they dealing with on a daily basis?
Sure. So RoleCatcher actually gave some really great insights on this. And one of the biggest ones is ensuring timely deliveries.
Okay, that makes sense.
You're coordinating with transportation providers, managing schedules, troubleshooting any issues that come up.
Which I imagine could be a lot, especially during, like, peak seasons or if, something unexpected happens, like a blizzard.
Oh, for sure. It definitely keeps you on your toes. Inventory management is another big one. So making sure that you're maintaining optimal stock levels, forecasting demand, trying to minimize waste, that's all really important.
With all the different types of beverages out there, I can only imagine that inventory management is like a whole thing.
Oh, it definitely is.
Okay, so timely deliveries, inventory. What other challenges are just like par for the course in this role?
Well, cost control is a major factor. You're always trying to figure out how can we optimize these delivery routes? Can we negotiate better rates with our suppliers? How do we minimize our transportation costs overall?
Right, finding that balance between efficiency and then also cost effectiveness.
Exactly. And then there's the compliance side of things. So, staying up to date on all the regulations and industry standards for beverage distribution, things like safety, sanitation, labeling, licensing, it's a lot to keep track of.
Oh, right, so there's like a whole legal side to this as well.
Absolutely. And then let's not forget about managing relationships with all the different stakeholders. You've got your suppliers, your retailers, sales teams, even customers sometimes.
It's a lot of people.
It is. But those relationships, they're so important because when things are running smoothly, it makes everyone's life easier. And when issues do come up, which they inevitably will, having those strong relationships makes it so much easier to resolve them.
So communication, diplomacy, and probably a lot of coffee are essential in this job.
You could say that, but on a more serious note, ensuring customer satisfaction, that's really at the core of everything.
Right, because at the end of the day, you're trying to get those beverages into the hands of thirsty consumers.
Exactly. If those products aren't delivered on time, in the right quantities, in good condition, that reflects poorly on the entire chain, so it's a big responsibility.
Yeah, it sounds like a high-pressure job, a lot of responsibility. but I imagine it could also be incredibly rewarding, right?
It definitely has its challenges, but for the right person, someone who thrives in a fast-paced, dynamic environment, someone who really enjoys seeing their efforts pay off, it can be a very fulfilling career path.
Before we wrap up, I want to kind of circle back to something we talked about earlier, which was this idea of, transferable skills. How a career in beverage distribution management is not a dead end. It can actually open doors to so many other opportunities.
Absolutely, and that's one of the most exciting things about it, because those skills that you're developing, logistics, inventory management, data analysis, problem solving, communication, leadership, those are all incredibly valuable in a wide range of industries.
So it's not just about moving beverages. It's about building a skill set that you can take with you wherever you go.
Exactly. Precisely. So let's say, you've been a beverage distribution manager for a few years and are ready for something new.
What kind of options would be out there realistically?
Well, you could climb the ladder within the beverage industry, of course. Maybe overseeing a larger distribution network or managing other managers. That's always a possibility.
I got to moving up to that next level.
Right. Or you could leverage that experience and transition into a related industry.
Okay.
So something like food and beverage manufacturing. Retail's a big one. Logistics and transportation, obviously, those are all very closely related.
It's amazing to see how this one role can be like a stepping stone to so many different paths.
It really is, and especially now with the demand for supply chain and logistics expertise, that's only growing. So having a background in beverage distribution, that gives you a real advantage in the job market.
That's so valuable.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about when they're first starting out. It's not just about the job itself. It's about that long-term trajectory and what doors it might open for you down the line.
Absolutely. And beyond just the career aspect, think about the personal and professional growth that you're getting by being in such a dynamic field.
Yeah.
I mean, you're facing challenges, you're celebrating successes, you're building resilience, you're learning how to adapt, you're really understanding how businesses work at a fundamental level.
Those are skills that you can take with you anywhere.
Exactly. Whether you're just starting out or looking for a change, a career in beverage distribution management could be incredibly rewarding.
We've covered a lot today, from the nitty-gritty of the job to the industry's future. But before we wrap up, I always like to leave our listeners with something to ponder. With all this talk about data analytics, AI, and futuristic delivery, what do you think is next for beverage distribution management?
That's a question that keeps industry leaders up at night, but in a good way. It really gets you thinking. Will robots run entire warehouses someday?
Oh, wow.
Will drones deliver right to our doorsteps? Will AI algorithms know what we're thirsty for before we do?
Now you're making me thirsty. But those advancements could totally revolutionize how we get our beverages.
Absolutely. But it's not just about the tech. It's about how that technology will change the role of the beverage distribution manager. Will they become masters of automation conducting a symphony of robots and algorithms?
Interesting. So almost like a conductor.
Yeah, exactly. Or will they need even stronger interpersonal skills to manage the human element in an increasingly automated industry?
It's kind of a fascinating paradox.
It really is. And then there's sustainability. How will these innovations impact the environmental footprint of beverage distribution?
That's a really important point. Will we see more eco-friendly transportation, electric vehicles, cargo bikes, things like that?
It's definitely possible. And what about packaging? Will we move away from single-use plastics to more sustainable options?
Yeah.
Biodegradable materials, reusable containers. There's so much potential.
It really speaks to the ever-changing nature of this industry.
It does. Beverage distribution management is constantly adapting to new challenges, new tech, new demands. And as we've seen, it's a career with incredible potential for growth, innovation, and impact.
So if you enjoy solving problems, optimizing systems, maybe even geeking out over data analytics and emerging tech, this could be the field for you.
And who knows, maybe you'll be the one leading the charge toward a more efficient, sustainable, and of course, delicious future for beverage distribution.
I'll drink to that. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and a big thank you to RoleCatcher for their insightful resources. Remember, knowledge is power, so keep exploring, keep learning, and see what amazing paths you uncover.